marketing, we can actually use AI to mimic your voice, and you'll never have to say anything again. With like a 2-minute clip of your voice, we can basically make you say anything that we want. Terrifying.
It
because that means
is.
somebody could grab my voice and convince people that I'm saying something that I'm not, which
Right.
is downright terrifying.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wealth Unfiltered. I'm Samantha Parinello, your host of the show. I am so excited because it's been about an entire month since I've had my resident guest expert on, and I'm excited to welcome back to the show, Chris Parinello.
Hi. Lovely to be here, finally, again.
I know. We've had some wonderful guests. For the last 3 weeks, we've been talking about everything from how to access your credit card points to estate planning. Last week, we also had a fantastic guest, one of my personal mentors, on how to basically learn the habits of millionaires and to be successful. So we've had a slew of wonderful, wonderful shows. But this week, we are back in our home studio, and we're very excited because this one, I think, is probably pretty powerful with everything we have going on lately. So we're talking about the distrust and mistrust of the mainstream media. One of the things that we are going to talk about today is not only what's going on here in the US, but globally as far as this conversation goes. So I'm really excited. I know that we've had a lot of conversations in our own home about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm really excited too. This is a fun topic.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I think it's important to start with the facts, right? So since the 1970s, there has been a company, I think they're called Gallup Journalism or Gallup Media, something along those lines. But they have been actually doing surveys and research on basically households across the US. So this one is just US based. But all of their facts are showing that from the 1970s to today, they have analyzed the trust in which people feel that is coming from the media. And most of it is through the big names that you see on television. However, as through doing my research, there is kind of a phase out, right? So there's also, do they trust their local news? Do they trust the mainstream media? Do they trust social media? And that's gotten to be more consistent in today's day and age. But since the 1970s, 68 to 72 is what they're saying across the United States, percent of people trusted with what they were seeing on the mainstream media. They had faith that journalism was not opinionated, and they really did feel like when you were hearing something on the news, it was news. It meant it was real. And I think it's really difficult nowadays to decipher what you're seeing. And I think a perfect instance of that, this is more social media for this example, but it's as simple as the facts that you can go on any platform. And this morning, I was doing my little TikTok thing, seeing what all the other people are doing out there. I like to try to keep up with what's going on and see Chris and I love cross-referencing, what we see on Google, what we see on these different platforms, what we see on the mainstream media. And I was scrolling through, and one of the things that came up, and I started reading it out loud, was that the dog whisperer was going to prison with a life sentence based on, I guess it was as of a year ago, he was having charges brought against him, and that in the last week or two, he's been sentenced to life in prison. And there was a whole thing about it. And as I'm reading it out loud, Christopher's skepticism meter started going off. So why don't you tell him about what you read?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just anything you see. I think if you've watched these episodes, you can clearly see the way that I look at the world is always with a really strong amount of skepticism. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I can't believe I hadn't heard that since this moment. So I started researching it, quickly debunked. And it was kind of scam media. And I think even more so today, it didn't just start now, but I think when you're looking at the news, when you're looking at things that you see, it's always a good practice to try to figure out why the information is coming to you in this way. And it's usually either to get you to engage with it. So how could I say something so incredulous that someone's going to be like, no way, and click the button and then they've gotten whatever they were trying to get out of that post. Or a lot of times it's somebody's trying to make money off of the news media. So it's just like anything else in life. If you can put yourself in the shoes of the person that's producing the content or whatever it is, it's usually going to tell you like more about what you're actually looking at and why than the actual piece of news.
Yeah, and that's not the first time this has happened. That is just a today example, but there's been many times, and it's been anything from something like that, like an arrest, to health things. I actually saw recently there's this woman, and she's pretty well known for her, not only like her fitness program, but like her health and like what she gives you for like options for eating and that kind of thing. And as much as I love AI, it is a dangerous tool because
Yeah.
what I saw was somebody using her voice and trying to create her mouth moving to try to sell a product. And I am sure she has no idea that this is out there. And eventually she will, and hopefully it'll get shut down and she can go through the right channels of getting that person taken off. But, someone's trying to sell something and use her
Yeah.
through AI. And you could tell because her mouth wasn't actually doing the things that it was saying. It was like attempting to, but it didn't do a great job.
Yeah, or she's trying to sell something and doesn't have any more time to actually record video.
Definitely not. Like, definitely not.
I mean, I can see that because it's gotten
It was
to the
her
point.
image. It was her. It was just her mouth wasn't moving.
I have been reached out to at Viking Capital from marketing agencies and groups, and they were like, look, like if you're tired of doing video, you're tired of putting together the things for marketing, we can actually use AI to mimic your voice, and you'll never have to say anything again. With like a 2-minute clip of your voice, we can basically make you say anything that we want. Terrifying. Because that means somebody could grab my voice and convince people that I'm saying something that I'm not, which is downright terrifying. But the technology exists, and what you're saying, I could see like a busy business executive whose constraint is I don't have enough time in the day to continue recording all of these things, using an AI service like that to say like maybe I could just use this and it'll look like I'm saying it, I'll be selling it, and I don't have to spend the 5-6 hours recording.
I could see that too, but that was clearly not what was going on here. Like not even ballpark. If you were going to do that, you wouldn't have that. You would make sure that it actually looked like it was synced up, and you would do the right thing, right? You want to sell something because it's yours. So, but that's just another way that I saw social media doing it. But as I was, saying earlier, there has been a lot of statistics, and as time has progressed, skepticism has gotten stronger and stronger. And I think the big part of that is because what people are finding is that journalism is no longer accurate and have integrity, it's opinion. And it's truly shifting. It's very, very difficult. And a lot of what I've been seeing too, there was another study done, and it was very specific to the mainstream media, social media, and the local news. And the local news across all age groups was, I believe, the local news. Why? Because they're showing true events that are happening. They're talking about the weather, even if it's wrong. And, everything basically coming out is, I believe what they're saying. It's my local news, and they have integrity still. It's not technically journalism, it's the news, right? But as we see some of this mainstream media, especially nowadays when politics has now basically taken over our news stations, things have gotten to be very political and very spread. And I think that everyone is looking at the news with skepticism. They just kind of have to.
Yeah, and I don't know when it happened, but I feel like the idea that you could trust what you were listening to was always false. So I guess being a skeptic, what I appreciate about the news today is at least the news is kind of compartmentalized into people that think like this, watch this channel. People that think like this, watch this channel. And you can watch both channels and get the point of view from two swaths of people that make up the and then you put in all of your news, it's focused on finance, and there's different varieties of financial news, but it's usually interviewing CEOs and economists. So you're getting kind of both in one. I tend to only watch that type of news. But I do appreciate that you at least know where to look for the type of news that you're looking for. And more than that, I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, because they're over what they feel like is probably a lot of propaganda in mainstream
Right.
news, where it's so expected what you're going to hear, and there is a lot of mistrust. People are going to podcasts like this one, or there's a lot of like really big, sophisticated podcasts where people are going there, and that's where they want to get their news from.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's been the major verdict that you're seeing with all of the studies. So since, like I said, in 1972, it was around 72%, 68 to 72% of people they trust. By the late 90s into 2000s, that number was closer to 55%. So you see a huge number of a drop off as like skepticism started to grow. And then today, it has not they ended up having to change it by political party because it was such a variety, a wide span of who believed in what. So as
Mhm.
far as the study that done by those people, 54% of Democrats still believe in the media that they're seeing, and only 27% of Republicans. And then I believe the percentage was, gosh, I want to say it's like 12% of, no, I lied. It's 27% of independents and only 12% of Republicans
Wow.
for the mainstream media, according to the research that I was doing
It'll
today.
be interesting to see how those statistics are broken down, because I feel like Republicans as a whole um, have lost trust in a lot of the news channels that aren't Fox News. So if they were just filling out a survey and they say, "Do you trust the mainstream media or not?" They would probably mostly write no, even though there's probably certain channels that they watch where they have a little bit more trust. I'd be interested to see how that study was.
Yeah, I would as well. It doesn't, it literally, the study shows you the time frame, shows you the statistic, and then that's it. It's just like a graph that shows you,
Yeah.
and it was saying we've done this over this many years, and this was the newest poll. So it's a survey done. It's a poll. So obviously, it's the people who wanted to participate. It doesn't speak amongst everyone, but to see those kind of numbers and that variance, right? Because before they were saying that this was just the general public saying this, but it is now so spread out with 54, 27, and 12. I mean, that's a very wide span of everybody just saying like, man, I don't know what to trust anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's a lot of factors into that as well. However, I would say that the social media aspect of it all is really interesting, because then a different study started breaking it down by age group.
Right.
And just like you would imagine, I think the general public would imagine that our 18 to 29-year-olds, I think the number was like around 60%. It was like high 50s into 60% believe all social media. They're like, yes, I trust social media. If I see it on social media, I definitely trust it. And just like you would think, just as the ages get older and older by the 10 to 20 years, so the next demographic, it was like 30. The next demographic, it was like 20 something. And then the last demographic, which is in the 60s and older, was like 12%. So like, as the generations keep going, which I think everyone would think that, but I was surprised to hear that it was social media and it was so high between 18 and 29, because social media to me is known for opinion. It is where people
Right.
come out to tell their opinion, not to tell the news. So to call it facts or to call it news, I was pretty shocked.
That's one of the wonders of, America's political system is at the root of it, it's freedom of speech. So
Yeah.
being able to hear millions of people's viewpoint and what they think, you still get the power to hear that information and then decide what you think. Now, some people are like, well, news that isn't true is dangerous because a lot of people might believe something that's untrue. But a lot of this stuff, it isn't fact or fiction.
Right.
It is conjecture. It is opinion. It's somebody's take on what they see, the reality to them, which I think is pretty neat. I always liked that. Where I saw things kind of going south over the last 5 or 6 years was when the majority of people in my age bracket were starting to get their most reliable news source was like watching Stephen Colbert
Right.
or The Daily Show. And it was like humor mixed with news. And it got to the point where a lot of people were really trusting these people to be investigative journalists, which they
Yeah.
weren't. So I see it lots of different ways, but at the end of the day, I think the way everyone, like with our daughter, when she's, what should I believe? I think what you teach the young people, whether they're 20 or whether they're 9, is it's your responsibility to find the truth in things.
Absolutely.
You can never just trust something to be true, and that the yearning for knowledge is important. Like that's part of what life is supposed to be, is going out and researching, finding information. Especially with technology nowadays, you can literally go on, like when we were growing up, it was like, oh my God, we can go on the internet. I don't have to pull out an encyclopedia anymore. Now you can like basically
Yeah, 10
ask,
minutes later after dial-up, it's like, meow, meow, meow.
yeah. Now it's like you can pull up Grok AI, or you can pull up
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and you can say, I'm looking for the historical context of this event in history and how it relates to this. And it will literally answer all of your questions. So it's pretty neat. And I think that's the right way to use things, is to ask for framing and then use that and then continue to research, because there's a lot of potential problems with AI and the way it scrapes information off the internet. It might not always be accurate.
Right.
But it's incredibly neat. I can imagine like being at the dinner table 20 years ago and being able to just ask a question and having all the source material and all the information. Like debates should be happening all over the country right now that are really fun.
Yeah, I would actually hope that was happening more within the homes, but I feel like people are so isolated into their devices instead of like sitting down and having a discussion, which is sad. You and I, we love discussing things. That's why we do this. And we definitely have, differing opinions on certain things, which makes, I think, our conversations really interesting and fun for ourselves. And we're obviously very respectful with each other, but it's nice to have somebody else, especially somebody you respect, right, have another opinion and really make you think twice, or, maybe I want to look into that a little bit more. And I like that. I think that people should be doing that more. One of the things that I wanted to bring up as well is how marketing and sales have, really triggered the difference in media. It's twofold. One is the news. And I think one of the major reasons we're seeing this, and I think you maybe can speak to this even more than I can, but is that when you look at news that is driven by not only political parties, but by pharmaceuticals or anyone that has money and power, it tends to lean to whoever has that money, whatever they want said, because they hold the power, right? So I think it's difficult because you don't know if your news is real in the sense of you can trust it if it's being backed by someone's opinion that has money and power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's what's happened with big corporate, news channels and stations that have built up a lot of influence and power. A lot of the personalities that you kind of build relationships with and fall in love with watching the news, you feel like you're talking and listening to that person, because that's one of the reasons why you have news anchors, because they're relatable. You listen to these people night in, night out, and you pick the ones that you like to listen to. But, what was really interesting with this whole podcast generation is a lot of these folks that worked at these news channels eventually were like, I can build a following on my own, and you can no longer tell me what I have to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was like one of the first times where I never really thought about it. I always was a little bit skeptical, so I didn't just believe everything I heard. But at the same time, I never really thought about it until 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, especially in the sports world too, where a sports anchor who you watch all the time, you're like, man, this guy's always right, and then you hear him on his own podcast, and he's like, sometimes you have to, like, you're basically told to be devil's advocate. Like, you both get two sides of an argument. The point of the show is to capture viewers' attention, and the mainstream media is just like that too. They're all vying for your eyes and your attention. So they're trying to figure out, what can we put out here that's going to be exciting, that people are going to want to watch,
right?
Because that's how they sell commercials. That's how they actually make money. So if you're watching,
it's a business,
an ESPN news show with an anchor, like the two people might be arguing. One person might win, but he might have been incredibly handicapped, where the other person just had an impossible argument to win, and he had to argue it because that's how the show is going to be interesting. And I think that that's happening across all news in media, is things are getting so scripted and things are getting so driven by um, the amount of money that people understand is there if they can capture your attention.
Yeah.
That is, I think, in essence, why things are the way they are.
I don't even know if this has a lot of relevance to the topic, but I have to ask about this because this 2 days ago, 3 days ago, we were on the treadmill, we were working out in the morning, and you stopped everything and you were like, "You will not believe what I just saw on the news." And there was a big argument.
Yeah, no, and I was watching CNBC,
Right.
and with all that's happening in the financial markets right now, and like I think one thing the news has done in the last 2 weeks is everyone in America knows what a tariff is. They know the history of tariffs. They know how they work, and this is on CNBC. It's all supposed to be related back to the economy, and you very rarely see news anchors that go off script and like totally lose it on one each other.
Yeah.
And I think the one I was watching, it was Steve Leisman, and it was what's the other guy's name? Basically every time they deliver economic news, he's the one that comes on. And they had differing opinions, and you could tell that they were truly passionately arguing their point and didn't agree. And that's something that like I thought it was great. Like it made me enjoy the show more to actually see people use emotion to argue their point, and were visibly upset when they weren't able to kind of finish on a strong note or
win the fight.
It was never going to be won.
Right.
But like that, I gave me a little bit of hope that what I was watching was a little bit more real.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still need to go back and watch that because you told me I wasn't watching the same thing as you, but I definitely want to see it in the moment because I love that authenticity that you see when somebody is passionate about something, whether you agree with their point or not, right? I think the point that I'm making is that it's a good feeling to see something real happening and know that, you know what, this is two human beings up there. They're not just like whatever you're seeing behind the screen. So I definitely want to take a look. So another thing that I wanted to talk about, we were just talking about advertising money and how that's driving the mainstream media. But one of the things that's driving social media that I find very interesting is that your marketing is more important now than ever. And there's, with TikTok in particular, Instagram, those two platforms I think have the most influence as far as people needing people to click or to follow or and so there's so many people out there doing it. So the competition is high. Mm-hmm. And you want to be the person who is being looked at, who's being followed, who is becoming reputable in whatever said industry that you're trying to market to. And we're seeing a lot of like clickbait type like things that I don't even know what the right word would be, because we're seeing people use clickbait to then pull people in. And then you can't tell if that clickbait thing was then to pull you in and then what's behind it is genuine, or now because it's gotten so muddled that it's a clickbait thing that draws you in and then you're being duped, right? And that's the thing that I don't like, is because you can't tell half the time. You really don't know. And it's the good people out there are having a harder time having people understand that they are genuine and doing a real thing because you're seeing it everywhere.
Well, I think that a lot of the mediums for advertising on social media are going to find ways to do that. And I think a lot of them have already. So like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, like the ones that you mentioned, this happens to me daily where I will see something in my stream. I'm an avid Dolphins fan, and it'll be like, Tua Tagovailoa gets traded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa. I was like, this can't be true. And I click on it, and then they got me, right?
Yeah.
Then I go in there, and it's like a bunch of spam. It's either like a bunch of ads that I have to get rid of. And like now I know like to ignore the outlandish things and go to like something I trust to research that information if I see it. But I think what a lot of these social media companies do is their algorithm now weights like a click and an abandon versus like a click and true engagement. So if I click on that and then I spend 10 minutes reading the article, then that shows the algorithm that it was true content that was worthwhile. Whereas if I click on it
Or at
and I'm
least
like,
interesting
this
enough.
is garbage, and I immediately back out of it, they probably got some sort of benefit from you clicking on it. But I think I was at that Alex Hormozy event, and they were talking about marketing, and he was basically saying everything that he had talked about from years ago wasn't as relevant, and now like there's a huge push towards long form content. Because if you can prove and gather people where what you're giving is valuable enough to where someone will watch you for 20, 30, 40 minutes, then the algorithm will push those things to other people. And your smaller content will get pushed to other people too, because now they feel like, okay, this person's getting this much engagement. They're actually saying something somebody cares about.
Right.
And as that algorithm grows and they use more common sense in how it works and pushes things in certain areas, I think the entire market will get wise to how to participate and get the best outcome.
Well, and I think the small nuance in that is paid advertising versus organic, right? Because one of the things that happens with paid is you get a little bit more leeway, right? You are allowed to do more, say more clickbait type scenarios to get that engagement that you're looking for, whereas organic isn't that way. You know, you're not paying something, it's not being pushed. So you really need those consumers or the people who are seeing it to truly want to follow you, to truly want to see your content. You have to be a little bit more authentic with that piece.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, completely agree.
So one of the other pieces, it's almost silly, but one of the things that we saw too through the growth of social media becoming more of almost like the news source for so many is a growth in like conspiracy theories.
Oh yeah. Everyone loves a good conspiracy theory, myself included.
Yeah. So I just find it really interesting. So one of the ones that has trickled back multiple times to me that I've seen a lot is there's all this debate going on about has anyone actually been to the moon? Has there not been anyone been to the moon? And there's all these like different like fact checkers and all things. And honestly, like I'm not here to debate that with you. I just think it's like a very hilarious thing that keeps coming up on my feed. I'm like, why is this coming up on my feed? But I just find like that's one, right? But there are so many people bringing up so many different things. And kind of like you were discussing with algorithms, it's like once you give just a little bit of time to something, you're like, oh, that one thing was really interesting. All of a sudden, you just start seeing more and more and more. And I'm like, I don't want that for me. But people who are susceptible to those things, I think that's where it gets dangerous, because what ends up happening is that all of a sudden they were like, I wonder if that's real, or man, that's something. And then another one comes up. Oh, that adds credibility because somebody else is saying it. Oh, somebody else said it too. It has to be real.
Yeah. No, and a really funny example of this is I was watching a Netflix show that was based on like historical, like Sicilian, like a period piece called The Leopard. And I found it fascinating. I'm Sicilian. I love going to Italy. We were just in Sicily. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to understand. Like, so like I watched the first episode and I'm like, I have to know everything about this before I watch the rest of the series. Like I start researching it. Then boom, like every single thing I see in every medium is about traveling to Sicily, the best food you're going to find in Sicilian food market. Like they were like, this guy is interested in Sicily. So every single person that sells anything related to Sicily, we're going to bombard him with these things because he's going to love it. and like that's essentially what's happening is like the algorithm is so smart that like if you show interest in anything, they're going to find the person that sells it and they're like, we found the perfect customer for you.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's good or bad. You know, if I was...
It's only bad when it's false news.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
You know what I'm saying? Because false news is everywhere. And one of the things I was hearing is that people are purposefully putting that out there to get followers. So they will say some outlandish thing and then fully commit to it, and then that's it. They don't say at the end it's not. They don't say anything else about it. And then you fact check it in the world, right? By, oh, let me see who else is saying this. Oh, I see it again.
The
I see it
upside
again.
is that I know where to get the best granita. I know where the hidden caves are. I know all the fun things we can do the next time we're there. I know how to buy a house there. Like every single thing you can know about Sicily, I now know. So maybe it worked. Maybe this is great news for everyone that is researching anything.
Yeah. No, you're right. But I love the fact that you and I have the foresight to do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of young Americans don't. I have several family members who are 30 and under, and they are some of my best friends. They're some of the most brilliant people, doctors, nurses. I mean, I have some of the most intelligent people in the world in my family who I love and I look at as my sisters and my brother, and I love them. But when I hear them talk on things and I can tell that it's fully social media and it has no historical context to it, it takes all of my all of my being not to just be like, did you fact check this? Like, where did you hear this information? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's always a piece of truth in a lot of the things that you hear.
For sure.
But then a lot of opinion out there too.
Well, it's like things are a lot of times taken out of context.
Oh, sure.
So and that's one thing that you see in the mainstream media a lot. When somebody's trying to make an argument, they're looking for data points to help bolster the argument, which is what they should do.
Yeah.
So they'll find like a sentence that like perfect. This sentence without any of the other words involved in the 10 minutes of this person talking, this one sentence really bolsters this argument in this way. Let me show that 10-second clip. And it's really hard to fact check that because you'll see this and you'll look at it and be like, wow, like all of these things together make me feel like there's evidence that this thing is true.
Right. But I didn't hear the
beginning. You have to do much deeper
Yeah.
research to kind of figure things out. And usually it's less trying to fact check the person. But if it's something that you really care about, like say you're someone that's trying to figure out a tariff situation, like with what's going on right now, it's better to search out the people in the world that really know this really well and have been talking about these types of things, true economists, and that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, kind of see the things that they're talking about and their takes on things, and then research those things and try to hone your argument based off of that, than just going down a rabbit hole of potentially misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think fact checking, what you see is the full scope of what was actually presented is a huge, bonus and something that people should be doing. I think also looking for the first source, the prime source for whatever it was, right? I think that's a really important tactic that people should be using. Another form of news, obviously, is in writing, in journalism. So like I write blogs, I write blog articles based on for Viking Capital. So I will go in and I write like true articles that have sources, and I fact check things and I make sure the things that I'm putting out there are true. But that's not everybody. People can write blogs and put things online and it can be anything they want. Yeah. And a lot of what you see is a lot of opinion. And if you're not first of all, if you don't see sources, you should probably assume there's a lot of opinion. Everyone should be putting sources into anything that they're writing if they're credible. 2 is if they are going to be putting sources, let me rephrase that. If they're not going to be putting sources, then you have to assume why. Like start asking yourself why that person's not doing that. And if they just maybe don't know, they're new to it, fine, whatever. But anyone who you're looking at as like, this person's going to teach me something, you should really be knowing that they have multiple sources backing up whatever claims they're talking about, especially if it's something related to something that's going to affect your life. So if it's a health thing, don't ever just take the one time that somebody says, oh, this is how you'll lose 15 pounds, or this supplement is good for you. I can't tell you how many times I've seen things about supplements and those, I was going to get paid $30 for every time I sold, 20 of these or whatever it was. Right. So they're just saying what they want to say so they get their money. But that supplement actually does nothing, or it's a placebo, or it has other things in it.
It's not going to kill you, but it's not going to do what they said.
Right. So like there's a lot. It can't just be about the news. It's about anything that you're purchasing, anything that you're trying to maybe learn about, something that you want to implement into your lifestyle.
Well, and I think a lot of that, and while I would expect people that are trying to sell something to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of like what needs to be taught to our children, friends and family, is like, if you're gullible enough to believe everything that you see on the internet, then maybe you deserve to be tricked. Like
Yeah.
it's mean, it's rude, but this is Wealth Unfiltered, right? Like, don't be gullible. Like, like,
Fact check.
yeah, like you should always feel like you're being sold something. And I think from someone that has worked in sales, works in investment sales, it
What's
is
their motive?
it's always going to be like, look and see, like, how is this person, like, why is this person saying that? Give people it's trust and verify, right? Anything that you do is trust and
Absolutely.
verify.
Yes.
Protect yourself. You're the only one that's going to do it. And have that sense of skepticism that says, like, if I'm gullible, someone's going to take advantage of me.
Right. All right. Well, to wrap up the episode, what I want to know from you is if there were, let's say two pieces of advice that you can give to our daughter as she continues to grow up and see all the different platforms and news. And right now, I mean, we don't let her have access to that stuff, but eventually there's going to be a day where we allow her to start having more exposure. And when that happens, what are going to be the two things that your advice that you'll put upon her so that she hopefully can make informed decisions?
I mean, she's going to hate this, but the thing that I would want her to do the most is to pay attention to the financial markets.
Yes.
I know that she's not going to be super excited about that, but just understanding how things work, why they work, like, what's the viewpoint. Like, even when you watch CNBC, you see like Willie Walker, the head of Walker and Dunlop, will come out and he'll very bullish on multifamily. Why is he bullish on multifamily? I mean, I'm also bullish on multifamily, but like, that's his world. He's also hopeful on multifamily.
Right.
You see someone else that is in logistics or manufacturing, and even if things don't go down, even if they're doing it on purpose, like, that's where their mind is at, they're focused on. So it's like finding the people in those areas, and money in many ways makes the world go round. So understand how that works, how different financial systems work together, how global economies work together. It's fascinating. And I think I am the person I am today because my dad taught me that when I was about Ella's age. And it's like the one thing that I would want to make sure that I impart on her. The other piece of advice I would give her is what we just talked about. It's, don't get tricked.
Don't take everything at face value.
Don't take everything at face value. Trust and verify. And really, think for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't, like, I hate it when I'm having a debate with somebody and someone's like, well, this is wrong because I know someone and they're a teacher and they said this.
I know.
I'm like, is that a good enough sourced information to, like, prove and validate your point? So I think one of the things that I would be thrilled if Ella did when she's in middle school or college, at high school, is debate, and actually learning the science of bolstering an argument and understanding what it takes to build an argument, even if you know you're wrong.
Right. And framing.
Like, even if you know you're wrong, you have the crappy side of the argument and you have to argue a point that most people are going to disagree with.
Yeah.
What if you can understand how to build the case for a bad argument? It's going to be very hard for you to look at things that you see in the world and not feel like someone's doing that.
Very true. Kind of be a little bit more on the defensive, especially in today's day and age.
Right. Even when I'm right about something, and this happens like in executive meetings at Viking, a lot of times I'll have so much conviction that I'm right. But then I'll try to play devil's advocate against myself and argue my point with just as much conviction.
Yeah.
Just to see what that side of the argument looks like if I try to reframe my vantage.
Yeah. No, I think that's super wise, and I love that. And I will happily help you through that journey with our daughter.
Wonderful. She's going to fight.
She is going to fight us. She is a beautiful, strong-willed woman, little lady who will be a strong-willed woman. So, well, I hope that this was insightful. I would say the biggest takeaway that we would really love is that all of you fact check, even us,
especially us.
And just make sure that, you're doing your due diligence on things, that you are taking your time, you are making sure that you're putting yourself and your family first, and you don't take what everyone else says as the last word. Get your own opinion out there and make sure that it's sourced, that you fact check, and multiple, forms, right? Look at different sources. Don't just go to TikTok, or don't just go to Google, or don't just go on one station. Our favorite thing ever is going to all the different news stations, listening in the same day, because they're all talking about the same things, just from different perspectives. So I think that's the biggest thing that we love. So until next time, we're grateful for you. And I'm really grateful to have you back for another episode.
Thanks. Happy to be back.
Have a good night. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.